Hello, I'm Mike Kowalski, and I wanted to welcome you to my course here. Pigment for those things. So I'm just wetting that top surface of the paper. That's all I need to wet to do a soft sky, dropping in some pure yellow ochre and a mix of, or not a mix, just some pure cobalt right on top over that, letting them mix together. I'm dropping a little wet and wet into this tree in the foreground here. I'll often do a wet and wet when I'm doing a tree with a lot of foliage against a sky. I'll often do a background wash of that tree and let it bleed a bit into that background sky. So in the end, your tree doesn't look so cut out. Dropping in some warm tones here overall in the back of the painting. The only things that I want to keep nice and bright and white paper are the area at the top of the bridge. Just there'll be a few lines at the top of the bridge that are getting some light. That's pretty much it as far as the white of the paper goes. I wouldn't want any of that ochre to get into the water at this point. I think that would affect the color of that wash. So I'm dropping in even a stronger wet and wet ochre wash warm over that tree area in the foreground. And I'm just waiting for things to dry up before I go in and do that background bit. Now I'm mixing up the color here for the water that's reflecting the sky a bit. And I'm just looking for that right color of gray to put in. It's darker than the sky. It's not as blue as the sky. So I'm starting out with a rich color and I'm graying it down. And in this case, I start out with a slight purpley blue and then grade it down with just a little bit of yellow. It's really best to try to figure out what is the base color you're working with. So in this case, I decided to work with a more violet color as opposed to a green color in my mixes. So I started with the blue and a little bit of rose to make that violet, and then I started graying it down with the yellow. If you did something reverse than that, you did blue and yellow and start with a green and grade it down, you find you're mixing a little bit harder. So try to identify in that color what is closest to a blue, a red, or a yellow, and start there. Here, while that mix is still wet, I'm dropping in some darks right at the waterline of the walkway. Whenever you're painting water and it meets something else, there's a habit of painting up to the edge of that other thing and then painting the other thing in. And I find water is probably one of the hardest things to master to paint, especially moving water. But whenever water hits another subject, it gives you a chance to join those two together in a way. And I find the best place to do that is right where they meet, right at the water line. It helps if there's a shadow there or something or some reflection. but that way you can get a bleed that goes into the water and a bleed that also goes up into the subject, and it joins those two together and makes the painting a little bit stronger.
I'd like to invite everyone who's passionate about improving their painting skills to a free masterclass by Andy Evanson, an artist I deeply admire and consider an exceptional watercolor teacher. Click the link in the video description to register for free. Don't miss this opportunity to learn from one of the best.
Needs some detail, not a lot, but just enough to make them look like buildings, and the buildings that actually exist there. So here's the finished painting. Afternoon Rome. I thought it captured things pretty well. A nice sense of light, good value, good color. Everything's fairly grayed down. The richest color is probably the tree in that middle foreground. Here's a detail of the background showing the little white specks that I've painted around to give a sense of architecture there in the back. So I'm heading down to my park with all my gear in my backpack. And we've got a lovely old park that was part of an old estate, filled with lovely old gum trees and surrounded by some nice period architecture. And this house up here at the top of the hill strikes my attention. It's backlit. The morning sun is backlighting everything that we see here. And I really enjoy painting backlit subject matter. So I'm going to set up here and do a painting demo in the park. This is the photograph that I'm going to have you work from. And the colors that I see are a little different than in this photograph, but this is what we're going to work as a base with to do our painting. I'm going to start with the cobalt blue. So some nice punchy yellow in there. A little bit of rose, and we're going to drop in some cobalt blue. Cobalt blue is a medium blue. It's not red, it's not green, it's right in the middle, and it makes really lovely neutral colors. It's probably the color I use most in my palette, that cobalt blue. The cerulean blue, since it's cooler, when you mix that with a yellow, you can get more vibrant greens, and cerulean can also make some very interesting grays as well. One of the problems with cerulean is it can get a little heavy in a painting. And depending on the quality of the cerulean you get, some ceruleans can be very gummy and gooey. The last one is ultramarine, which I use for my rich darks. And you can see I've put in a darker bit of yellow, stronger yellow, less water in the mix. Same with the rose. And we're going to put in this ultramarine blue, which is really nice and dark and rich. So you want it when you want something that's really punchy and dark. That's when you use that ultramarine blue. So let's talk you through each of these mixes. So when I'm mixing for these most of my paintings, I mix up on my palette a good bit of the colors that I'm using, so I don't have to keep going into the wells. I want some nice thick paint on my palette, so it just makes your painting process easier to have that available. So we're mixing that olive green up there. Starting with the yellow, making a green, pulling in that red, and controlling how much warmth we want into that mix. Pretty easy mix to do. And you just keep pushing and pulling each of those colors until you get something that looks about right. The second color is the gray, blue-gray bit of the roof. So using mostly blue there, making a purple. And I'm graying down that purple with the yellow. So once I get an idea of those mixes, it's in my head when I'm mixing on the paper, I'll have a better idea of where to start. I didn't find that mix particularly dark enough, so I'm trying to do the same mix with the ultramarine blue. And in the end, I found that something in between those two colors was a good match. It's a good idea when you are mixing a color to mix it up stronger, a darker color, because you can always add more water to it. But if you start with a weaker color, your watercolor is going to be very faint and weak. So this third color is the color of the grass, which is a very tawny, warmish yellow. So I'm mixing a kind of an orange color there, which is a little too rich, and I'm graying it down with the tiniest bit of blue. So there's just a little hint of green in there. This is a shadow color we're mixing up here. And I put in cobalt blue and cerulean blue, so you can see the difference in there. It's cobalt blue on the right. So I'm mixing those three together on the right. And on the left here, I'm going to drop down and make a graduated color that goes from warmer olive to cooler blue-green. So you can see how the different blues react when you mix them together. The color here is the shadow color of the brick. Brick can be a little hard to paint. Most students will make it too punchy. So you want to start with a nice, rich, orangey color, and then you gray that down with some of the blue. So in the end, you want, you're after something that's like a burnt sienna, which is a lovely reddish earth tone. You don't want it to scream out and be really, really bright orange red. And you can do all that with your complementary color in there. And this last color is a darker shadow bit. Mixing up the yellow up there, a little bit of red or rose. The rose is a really strong color, and you don't need a lot of it to make a change in your color. So just a little bit will work. And again, I'm emphasizing it's a really good idea to have some margin on your painting itself so you can check those colors. So I'm showing you the areas that tend to work best as a color match. I'm fiddling a bit there, trying to make it dark enough for me to be happy with it. Yellow and the red, a little bit of blue in there. This shows transition between the yellow and the blue with a little bit of rose in it, and then the warm to the cool there. The rich orange, adding the blue to gray it down a bit. And then this one making a nice gray, green, olive with the three colors. So these are Fabriano papers that I got when I visited Italy last summer. Each of these have 50% rag and 50% cotton in them. This is a cold press paper. I really love this paper. I mean, this probably wouldn't be my first choice for a painting that I think is going to be a really good painting. But for general painting, plein air painting, it's a great paper. This is the same Fabriano 50-50 mix. And this is a rough paper. You can't really see the surface on there, but that's a rough paper. I have some paper here that's also 25% cotton. That's what this is here. And this paper here is all right. It's okay. I can paint on it. All right. There's a painting. But I wouldn't choose that to do a really important painting on, just because it won't take a wash well. It's just problematic paper. But for just sketching, it's fine. One good thing about the student grade papers is sometimes the paper throws a curveball at you, and you've got to change your method of painting in order to make that paper work. And even though it is probably frustrating, it teaches you to be a better painter. So using a paper like Canson Montval, which is a student grade paper, and learning how to use that will really sharpen your skills. Much better than just using the same paper all the time. So keep a couple different papers on hand to try them, because you really won't know what you like until you try them. The last things we need to paint with, have some clips around. I don't encourage students to tape their paper because it buckles more, it seems, so I don't use tape for anything other than stretching paper. I use credit cards for scraping. You can use this rounded end, sharp end, that whole side, that sharp point. So I scrape a lot. If you look at all my paintings, you'll probably find a scrape in there somewhere. I know, really predictable. When things are dry, I like to use a razor blade to just get little tiny hairlines in the painting. It actually scratches the surface of the paper, and I find it very effective. I don't use any liquid mask. I do not like it. I'm not a fan of it. I've learned to paint around anything I want to save, and I think that works much better. So I don't use it. You're welcome to use it. I don't use it. An eraser, pencils. Mechanical pencil is really good. You don't have to sharpen it. You can hold it way back and use it lightly. A number 7. And this is probably my pencil of choice, which is a General's Layout pencil. I think other than that, we've probably got everything covered. So let's get to work and do some painting. Well, I hope you all had fun in the class. I really enjoyed putting it together.